perspective of life? How do we interpret what's going on for everything, every day, every choice we make? So tonight, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have Lisa speak to us. She, you just read this. She was the foreign language textbook specialist for the state of California. She translated books into Braille, and she taught Braille in prison. Just some of the things she's done. She's a website designer, and she's a wonderful mother and wife, and she serves here at the center in our youth on Sunday, with our youth on Sunday, and she's also my cousin. So I'm just delighted to please give a warm welcome to Lisa McClure speaking on grace and healing. Lisa?
Okay, well, I gave Judy some little slips of paper to hand out. And before I start my talk, I'm going to give you a little chance to write down 3 names of people who bug you, who get you angry. They could be anything from work colleagues, politicians, family members, maybe even yourself. But 3 people who just really bug you. And then we're just going to put it aside. And then I'll share what I have to share. It could. Yeah. Yeah. But, try to put an individual in there as well. You can put in a few. You might even think later of some more you can add to the list. Yeah. Three's always a good number. So when after my last talk, Judy asked me if I wanted to do another one, and so I've been kind of thinking of it ever since. And one of the things that keeps popping up is the word grace, and I came to realize that I didn't really know what it meant, and I started to think about how I used to think of grace, and it was something we said in our family. Like if you tripped, you'd say, "Oh, no one said my middle name was Grace." And we had a big player piano growing up, and my family would gather around it and put the little paper rolls in, and there was Amazing Grace was the old people song. They really loved it. I wasn't that into it. It was just a really deep, heavy song, um, and when Darren and I got married, I had a stepdaughter, Ella, and her middle name was Grace. And so I would tell her about growing up that we would joke about Grace being our middle name, but her middle name really was Grace. And I just the word grace kept popping up. Ella asked if we could have her friend over, and so we picked her up, and she came over to our house, and I finally said, "By the way, what's your name?" And she said, "My name's Grace." I was like, "Of course it is." And I've been reading a lot of Florence Scovel Shinn, and as I was reading in it, um, she talked about grace. So I'm going to share what it said in her book. She said, Jesus Christ brought the good news, the gospel, and there was a higher law than the law of karma, and that law transcends the law of karma. It is the law of grace or forgiveness. It is the law which frees man from the law of cause and effect, the law of consequence, under grace and not under law. We are told that on this plane, man reaps where he has not sown. The gifts of God are simply poured upon him. All that the kingdom affords is his. This continued state of bliss awaits the man who has overcome the race or world thought, or we sometimes say race consciousness. And then this next part really kind of tripped my trigger. A metaphysician once explained it in this manner. He said, the only thing which gives anything weight in nature is the law of gravitation. And if a boulder could be taken high above the planet, there would be no weight in that boulder. And that is what Jesus Christ meant when he said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The law of grace, the law of forgiveness. And it struck me as funny. I grew up Catholic. I went to Mass every Sunday. I went to catechism. I said the Lord's Prayer every day for at least 18 years, and I never really heard it. But this law of grace, of forgiving others, of non-judgment, of unconditional love, and this seeing the divine in each other with no exception, that it's a law. And one of the things we do here at the center is we recognize spiritual law. And so I started to think, well, when we light that candle for the Christ consciousness, this is what we're talking about. And of course, it's not just in Christianity. It's found in other traditions, and I found this amazing example that I want to share from an African tribe. And in this tribe, when someone does something harmful, they take the person to the center of the village where the whole tribe comes and surrounds them. And for 2 days, 2 whole days, they will say to the man all the good things that he has done. And the tribe believes that each human comes into the world as good, and that each one of us only desires safety, love, peace, and happiness. But sometimes in the pursuit of these things, we make a mistake. And the community sees those mistakes as a cry for help. And then they unite to remind him to reconnect to his true nature, to remember who he truly is, and he remembers the truth that he temporarily was disconnected from, the truth that I am good. And so there's so what they say to them is, I guess there's a compliment used in South Africa, and I'm not going to say it in their language because I'll just butcher it, but it says, I respect you, I cherish you, you matter to me. And in response, people say, so I exist for you. I thought, wow, can you imagine growing up in a society where that's how they handled transgression? And so I kind of wanted to share a personal thing that happened to me early on at the center. They always say that really good things happen when you're in class. And it was at a time when I wasn't thinking really awesome things about myself. I'd hit some bumps in the road, and my inner dialogue was pretty brutal. But I had enrolled in the Thomas Troward class with Patty. We gathered in the back, and during this time, I caught myself at home really beating up on myself, being like, why can't you do this adult thing? Why? I felt like I was letting everybody down, and I felt especially like I was letting my children down, which is really a painful thing to feel. I felt like I wasn't enough and that I was failing at everything. A lot like the woman in the video. And one day, out of the blue, when I was feeling these things, this thought came through so clearly, and it said, Joni Laidley doesn't believe that. Joni Laidley sees God in you. and, and Joni was in my class. And if any, we all know her. She's wonderful, and I trusted her, and I just knew, like deep down inside, Joni would never believe these thoughts that were going through my head. It just, that wouldn't happen. And so it became like my practice was when they came in, I'd be like, Joni doesn't believe it. I've never really told Joni this, so I'll have to share this with her. I'd be like, no, Joni doesn't believe that about me. And it was just like this little door that opened that made it so other things could get through. And I use that as an example of the power of grace. Because Joni was looking at me with no judgment, with absolute unconditional love. And she didn't do it intentionally. She was just, that's who she is. But it has such a powerful effect on my life. It started turning things around. And I had a similar experience with Joyce. We started becoming friends, and Joyce was always so complimentary. Oh, you're such a good mother. You're so creative. You're so, and finally I remember thinking to myself, you know, Joyce and I are becoming friends, and I really value our friendship, and I feel like, I kind of have to have a talk with her and let her know that I'm not all these things, you know, that, and so I sat down and I prepared, you've just got to be honest, about who you are. This is a, a friendship that you really, you want to be good with. And so a couple of times I kind of had this opportunity to tell her, look, Joyce, I'm flawed, okay? And she deflected it. She was like Wonder Woman, with the bracelets on her. She just wouldn't have anything to do with it. And finally I kind of dropped it. But even though I dropped it, I found myself being more patient. I found myself stepping out a little more to take risks. I found myself, so it had a powerful effect on me. And I think of our community here and of how we think of others and of holding each other in that unconditional love and in that space of non-judgment. And what a powerful healing modality it is. And so um, it reminds me of that Mother Teresa quote, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. And so those experiences of grace really blessed my life, and I'm so grateful for them. A few months ago, I was in my living room. It was about quarter to midnight. I'm not very rarely up that late. And I had left the porch light on, and I was about ready to meditate. I use this little timer called Insight Timer. And if you meditate for 10 days in a row, you get a gold star. And I had meditated for 9 days, and it was 15 minutes to midnight. and I was about to get my gold star, and somebody came to the door. And I was like, no, I'm about to get my gold star. What's going on? I step outside, and one of my neighbors had had way too much to drink and apparently had acted very inappropriately to another female neighbor. And 3 guys were coming over to beat him up. And I'm like, should have turned off my light. And I stood there with him, and he's scared, and his eyes are bloodshot, and he just smells really bad. And I'm thinking, well, am I being called to be a peacemaker? And nothing came. I was like, no, I don't know. I'm looking at him, and he's saying, it's been a really long time since I've been beat up. I'm like, well, that might be the night. I was like, well, let's just take a breath, And so I thought, well, I'll just stand here with him, so he's not alone. And I started to I could feel his self-hatred. It was so palpable. It was almost unbearable. And I thought to myself, so many of us are walking around hating ourselves. It kind of broke my heart. And just out of nowhere, I turned to him and I said, you're a really good guy. And it almost was painful for him to take that in. It was like, and I recognize the feeling. Someone gives you a compliment, you're just like, oh, I want to believe that, but I can't. But it makes me feel like I'm kind of going to break a little bit. And the evening turned out okay. The next day he came over, and I told him again, you are a really good guy. And I just thought, people don't believe that about themselves. They really, there's a lot of self-hatred out there. And when we're talking about forgiveness, and when we're talking about judgment, and when we're talking about unconditional love, we really have to look inside and make sure that we're not doing it to ourselves. And I'm going to share this story. And I think I might have heard it here, so I might get it wrong, but the idea behind the story is so good. And it goes along with Carrie's, what she wrote. It all loops together. There's this man in the subway, and he's selling pencils. And a man sees him, and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll go give him some money. And he puts some money in his can. And he goes to catch the train. And the doors are about to close, and he goes, something catches him. He runs back out, and he says, I am so sorry. I forgot to take my pencil. And he takes his pencil. And later, he goes to the same subway station, and he sees this man, but this time he has a desk and a stand and a cart with other items on it. And the man remembers him, and he says, I really want to thank you for the other day because you saw me as a merchant and not as a beggar when you came and you took the pencil. And so this energy that we put out when we see other people is really transformative. And honoring the exchange is also really important. And I used to think that was about paying what you owe and making a contribution. But I'm starting to see, like the woman in the video, It's about seeing what you have to offer. It's about recognizing in the exchange that you have something to give. You're never empty-handed. And when we make an exchange like that, it's really important to recognize that we have something to give, the other person has something to give, and the exchange is complete. And so I want to show my first slide, slide 1. I named it. Okay, there's this cool thing called the allegory of the long spoons. Has anyone heard of it? Okay, so in this first picture, this is a picture of hell. Okay, so these people are sitting around a banquet. It doesn't really look like a banquet in here, but this is the idea. But they have these really long spoons, and they can't get to the food. They can't feed themselves. And so they're starving. And then, so this is hell. And then we switch to the second slide. And they're feeding each other. And so I just think it's such a good metaphor for how we can be with each other. Is that we're in this, our perceptions. We're at this amazing banquet. And in order to enjoy it, we have to learn to feed each other. And it's not just that, it's also we have to see each other. Because how we see each other is a really healing thing. And it's not the pity thing, It's recognizing the other person has something to offer. It's recognizing both parts of the exchange. There's no charity in this. It's recognizing each other. That are some of the ideas that I kind of captured about grace, and about the state of non-judgment and unconditional love. And so I'm thinking, well, is this hard? And it reminded me of something that happened a long time ago. It was a long time ago because Ella was she was in kindergarten. And I was on the telephone with one of my Braille colleagues. We were trying to get people through the initial training to be a Braille transcriber because there's a huge shortage. And there's 20 lessons that you have to go through, and you have to pretty much get it perfect. And so we would attract all of these great candidates. And to be a Braille transcriber, it's pretty detailed work. And so ironically, when you find really detail-oriented people, they also tend to be very self-critical. They're the people you go to the restaurant with and they're finding the typos in the menu. They're good Braille transcriber material. And so what would happen is we would have these wonderful, bright transcribers who were all enthusiastic, and then they'd hit lesson 7. And lesson 7 was structured so there was no way you could get through without failing a couple times. And it was really kind of brilliant because what lessons do you remember? You remember the ones you got wrong. And there were some major lessons in lesson 7. And you kind of had to learn them by getting them wrong. And I was on the phone with my friend, and I was saying, if we could, because a lot of people would drop out at lesson 7. If we could just get these people to realize that being resilient is far more important than being perfect. And I got off the phone. Ella asked, what does resilient mean? And I said, resilient means trying again with the same amount of enthusiasm. And then she said, well, that sounds a lot like courage. And I will always be thankful for that definition of courage because I go back to it a lot because I thought courage is being a fireman or Joan of Arc, or, I mean, for me, sometimes courage is answering the phone. You know? He's laughing because it's funny. We're serious about that. So is this state of grace, is it hard? I would say it takes courage. We try again with the same amount of enthusiasm. And right now, Kate is in first grade. And so the last couple years have been, she's learning how to make letters and she's learning how to read, and there's some frustrations. I see her make an S backwards and she just goes from 0 to 10 in about 2 seconds. And, I can't, I'm so mad. And I wish I could get through, I feel all of the frustration, and I feel all I can do is watch. And I know on the other side of this that she's going to be reading and writing, and we're not even going to think twice about it. But right now, there are fits and starts, and so I kind of mused to myself, well, where in my life am I getting that frustration of learning new things, of where I need to be resilient? Where do I need to just drop the drama and know I'm going to get to the other side. She's going to learn how to read. She's going to learn how to write. Could we do it and be gentle on ourselves? Just knowing that if we just are courageous and we try it again with the same level of enthusiasm, we'll get to the other side. And it takes courage. We're not going to get angry at an acorn for not being an oak tree, right? I can't believe you. You're not even a sapling yet. We don't say that because we know it's going to happen. That's, well, unless you get made into cornmeal, acornmeal. But so I think this unconditional love, this state of non-judgment, is just so powerful, and we don't always give it the credit that it really deserves. But it's a decision, and it's a decision we get to make in every single moment. And I wrote a few things down about it. It's gentle determination, not force. We breathe through it. I still think about standing on that front porch with my neighbor, just going, just breathe through it. We're going to get to the next moment and the next moment. I don't know if you're going to get beat up, but let's just breathe for now. But we learn here, we watch our words. We know they're powerful. Try not to say anything when we're really mad. I think that helps. But we know that we're not going to be able to take power. We're not going to have power over anything we can't take responsibility for. So we start the only place that we do have control, and that's with ourselves. And with this idea of the law of karma and the law of grace, I've kind of come to think about it. The law of karma is like your basic math, an eye for an eye. 1 + 1 = 2, right? The law of grace is like higher math. It's when you get to those levels of math where they go, we don't really have an answer, but there's a probability. That's kind of where I dropped out of math. And because it's really hard that ambiguity is sometimes a little bit hard, but the law of grace is like that, because sometimes those questions come up. But what about that person who's really, really bad? Does it, should they be allowed? But it's a law. It's across the board. And it's way easier to wrap our heads around karma. The law of grace is pretty mysterious, but I really have come to believe it's where the magic happens. when you lift your problems out of that gravitational pull of karma. So I wrote a treatment for us all here tonight to embrace this law of grace. I'm going to have you all shut your eyes, and I'll read it for you. Knowing spirit, universal intelligence, God, creator of all things, is everywhere present. Divine love and infinite creativity are the essence of every atom and every space in between. And that we are part of this divine order, this divine life, and we identify with it in oneness. I am that I am. As children of God, we recognize the divine, the sacred in ourselves and others. We understand the divine power and freedom of forgiveness. We release those spots where we are tight, small, and holding. We allow our world to soften and expand, for circulation to flow, to give and receive love with ease, to know help and ease in movement. We release fear and live freely in our joy-filled presence. We release anger and live in undisturbable peace. What once seemed insurmountable to reach becomes a simple decision to forgive, to allow healing and grace, to forgive others, to forgive ourselves, and to stand in love and in joy, knowing we are part of creation, a creation of love, of joy, of health, of plenty, of beauty, of peace, of grace. I feel deep gratitude for this glorious life I experience. I am truly grateful for every blessing and every day. Confidently, I release my word to law. I trust and allow it to be made manifest, knowing that we are enough, that we are loved and love itself, and that all is well. So it is. And you can, and your piece of paper is your ticket to grace.